Okay. Just make sure I have all of my stuff in order here. Okay. Hello, welcome everyone. We're very glad that you could join us today. My name is Beth Yates. I'm the children's consultant at the Indiana State Library, as well as your presenter for today's session, Teen Tips. A couple of announcements. To register for other webinars and other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training options, you can see our continuing education section of that website. This session is about an hour, so you will receive one LEU for this presentation. If you're watching an archived recording of this webinar in the future, instructions for how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description on YouTube, or you can find those instructions on the ISL's continuing education site under LEU policies. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and get started. Just let me finish arranging all of my screens here so that we are good to go. All right, hello, welcome to Teen Tips. Like I said, I'm so happy to see you all today. Glad you decided to join me. Just a really quick heads up about all these icons that you see on your screen right now. This training actually stems from a national initiative to rethink teen services from YALSA, which is the Young Adult Library Services Association, which is part of ALA, and it's part of a larger project that I'm working on with them kind of nationally. Okay, so again, my name is Beth Yates, and I'm the children's consultant at the Indiana State Library. And yes, that is me as a teenager. I think I was probably 15 or 16 years old here. You can see I was really thrilled to have my picture taken. And I love to include this picture, not just to embarrass myself, although that does happen a little, but also because when interacting with teens, I think it's really important to have empathy. And one of the best ways to do that is often trying to remember what we went through as teens. You know, sometimes, hopefully you have some happy memories of being a teenager, but I know many of us also have a lot of painful memories of being a teenager. It's a time when you're going through so many changes, it can be a real struggle. So, so just remember that if you experienced it, there's a good chance that the teens you're serving in your library now are going through similar things. So today we are going to be talking about why we should want teens in the library, because having a deep understanding of why we do want them to come in it can really go a long way towards developing that empathy that we need to have towards them. I'm also going to give a super quick overview of teen development, because I think that's important to understand as well. And then we will end up with a few pointers or tips for interacting with teens. And my ultimate hope for this training is that you will leave understanding why and how libraries can make teen interactions positive ones. But before I tell you why we should want teens in the library, I want to know what you all think. So please, in the chat, go ahead and share with me, why do you think it's important to serve teens? A safe place to be. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That is an excellent one. We'll definitely talk about that more later too. Giving them a positive, safe adult. Yes, yes. Joan says they are our patrons and of the future and can direct our vision. Oh, I like that. I like that, direct our vision, because I hear, you know, there are future patrons all the time, but I don't know that we go the step further to consider that they can help us shape the future. Deborah says the library can offer many services and a great safe place and become lifelong readers. Yeah, absolutely. Teens can be super helpful. Yes, they can. And it's great if you can give them the opportunity to participate in planning things. Don says, we can be their answers for most everything, safe places, a role model, and foster their interests with classes, books, and etc. Kathy says, teens can be super fun. Absolutely. These are all awesome answers, everybody. Thank you. Another place for them to find new friends. Yes. We know that teens need to have those positive experiences with peers also. Yeah. Okay. Those are all excellent, excellent reasons. And honestly, you guys have covered. All right, my job's done. You've covered it all. No, but for real, I think you've hit all of the things that I have down here. Gives them something to do, somewhere to belong. Through our programming, they can actually develop a lot of social skills, things like communication, leadership. Yeah, they get to experience new things, things that maybe they wouldn't normally get to experience. And in fact, that is what my next slide is about. Because there's one last piece to this whole thing. Another big reason why libraries are well positioned to help teens, and that's educational equity. So we are going to watch part of a short video that elaborates on this, and only about 2 minutes of this video, so it's pretty quick.
Our education system is supposed to level the playing field by providing learning opportunities to wealthy and poor children alike. But as wealth inequality has grown to its highest level ever, we're seeing the creation of what is, in effect, a separate education system for the privileged, while at the same time, our commitment to providing quality public education for all kids has waned. More and more people are falling into poverty, and that includes their children. More than half of American elementary school students live in poverty. These kids are less likely to participate in important enrichment activities outside of school, because for many kids, school is no longer a place where they can access activities like music, arts, crafts, sports, media production, and theater. This is especially true in urban areas, where funding cuts to schools for enrichment programs has been severe. By the time kids reach kindergarten, achievement gaps already exist between students of different backgrounds. By then, wealthier children will have spent over 1,000 more hours than their poorer classmates on enrichment activities such as music lessons, travel, and summer camp. They also will have spent time around other kids from similar backgrounds and around caring adults who work to curate a learning ecology for them. Enrichment activities are often fee-based, limiting access to only a portion of kids whose parents can afford them. Children and families of the top 10% of earners spend 7 times more on out-of-school enrichment programs than the bottom 10%. As wealth inequality has become more severe, test scores of wealthy and poor children have grown further apart, as have graduation rates and college enrollment. Poorer students are much more likely than wealthy students to attend schools where graduation is not the norm. We need a learning ecosystem that challenges inequality by empowering people to create opportunity.
All right, so as you can see from that video, hopefully, there's a big difference in educational equity for our youth. And you know, that can be urban, but that can also be rural. And we know that a lot of Indiana is rural. So do you see any of these things where you live? Do you see maybe families who can't afford to put their children in after school activities? You know, music lessons cost money. And so do things like club sports, you know, Little League and things like that. So then that kind of leads to the question, where do you think libraries might fit into that picture? Let me know in the chat. It's not a trick question. Yeah. Exactly. Thank you, Michelle. Free programs. Libraries are really one of the last places that offer free services to our community, and we're really in a great position to be impactful on young people's lives. So as you can see, hopefully libraries can really offer an opportunity for our youth in our communities. And one other thing that we can offer and which teens need, and someone mentioned this one, is trusted adults who support them. Hopefully they have this at home, hopefully they have parents or caregivers who support them fully, but it's very possible that they don't. Often teens face very difficult circumstances at home, and the library might be their one safe place. Although even if they do have supportive adults at home, having someone besides their parents that they can trust is really important. It gives them another outlet if they don't feel comfortable talking to their parents about something, or it can show that someone outside of their family believes in them. So I mentioned earlier that reflecting on our own teen years can help us gain empathy for the teens that walk into our libraries. So we're going to do just a quick reflection. I'm literally going to do it for about a minute. And let me explain it to you before we start it. But the question that we are going to address is, when you were a teen, did you have an adult in your life who supported and encouraged your interests? And ideally, try to think of whether you had someone other than a parent who helped you discover or develop an interest or talent that was meaningful to you. And then, if whether you did or not, what impact did that have? Was it a positive impact, a negative impact? What kind of impact did it have? So just a quick example from my own life. My high school speech team coach, I joined speech team because my friends were doing it, and speech team was not debate. It was like dramatic or comedic interpretation, like you read from play scripts. So the speech team coach was also our local community theater director, and she encouraged me to audition for the summer musical that year. And that really ended up being an incredibly impactful experience for me. I was super involved in our community theater for the rest of high school and even into college. And in a roundabout way, I attribute many of the skills that I learned then to things that I still use, first when I was doing story times in a public library, and now when I'm doing presentations. And certainly a lot of self-confidence came from that experience when I was very shy before. So let's literally just take 1 minute. I want you to close your eyes if you want to. If you have your camera on, feel free to turn it off and just reflect to yourself. I'm not going to ask you to share these, although thank you for sharing, Deborah. That's awesome. You don't have to, though. Just keep it to yourself. I do want to acknowledge also that some of us might have memories that are too painful. We don't really want to think about them. And so if that's the case, feel free to reflect on some other teen that whether it's your own child, a niece or nephew, someone you've interacted with at the library, whatever. So just take a minute to think about that. Okay, so thank you for doing that. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to ask you to share your memories out loud, but do consider whether or not you had that impactful adult in your life. Would you like to be able to provide that experience to a teen now? Maybe, hopefully the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no, but hopefully it's yes. And rest assured, I'm not talking about changing every single child's life who comes into the library, but could you impact one? Could you impact a few? And you might be thinking, but I am not the teen librarian. I'm the circulation assistant, or I'm the collection development person. Why would I be worried about having a positive impact on teens? But the reality is, everyone who works at the library is making an impression on and sending a message to the kids who walk in that door. So you might only interact with them when they check out an item or when they're goofing off near your desk, but those are all chances to interact positively with those teens. And in turn, hopefully you're having a positive impact on the community where you work and live, because you're helping those teens to develop hopefully into fully formed and highly functioning adults who will potentially live in your community in the future. So I'm gonna play just one more quick video. This one's from a library in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think it does a good job of quickly demonstrating what I'm talking about. It's only gonna be about a minute.
Hi, my name is Jamie Roy, and I've been a teen specialist here at Batesville Regional Library for nearly 6 years. Our library is a regional library located on the west side of Charlotte, North Carolina. Since I've been here at Batesville Regional Library, we have tried many things to make our library as a whole more inviting to our diverse population of teens. Our staff here, like our teens, come from many different backgrounds, and the majority have grown up in the community and attended the same schools in the past. Many know what it's like to be judged not only by their looks, but also for where they are from. We work hard to make our teens feel welcomed. All of our staff, from children's to the circulation department, are encouraged to build relationships with our teens. As a result, our teens not only seek us out in the teen department, but we often find them talking to other staff in the building, either talking to a children's librarian about their day or asking a library aide at the front desk for relationship advice. It's gotten to the point where we actually have to shoo our teens away from the desk so the adult patrons can be served. It's an awesome problem to have. We treat our teens.
So then they go on to talk about how they have really encouraged their teens to help them with planning of programs and other things at their library, which I think is fantastic.
Something like.
All right. So what are your thoughts on that video? You can put them in the chat if you want to. Can you imagine a future where teens in your community interact with all library stuff like that? Or do you feel like you already have that at your library? If so, fantastic. Or if not, do you feel like it's worth aspiring to? No one has opinions? Thank you, Julie. Julie says she loves it. Okay, so hopefully by now I've made a case for why you should want teens in the library, as well as the positive impact we could potentially have on some of them. So check, we did that one. Oh, and Samantha says we're a small staff, so we'd like to aspire to all staff positively interacting with teens. That's wonderful, Samantha. All right, so we've covered why teens in the library, but I imagine many of you are potentially wondering how to deal with them now. How do we live the dream of having all those positive interactions when maybe you're experiencing some misbehavior by teens in your library? How do we get to the point of having those positive interactions? So behavior is definitely one of the biggest issues libraries run into when working with teens. So let's address the question, why do they act like that? I think that understanding why they are doing certain things can go a long way to extend empathy and understanding to the teens themselves. And from there, we can use strategies that will hopefully make working with them easier. And Deborah says, I have had children tell me that after coming to my story time and after school programs, that is why they love coming to the library. Yeah, you're able to establish those relationships with them. So teens and tweens, and it is important that we include tweens here, and I'll explain why in a second, are going through a lot of developmental changes, and those definitely contribute to their behavior in every way. In fact, they're developing in three major ways. Now, I will mention here also that, of course, they're developing in many, many different ways during these years. These are kind of the big three that I'm going to talk about today. The first way that they are developing is socially and emotionally. And we've already kind of addressed this. It's really the why of the question I asked earlier. Why should libraries serve teens? They're figuring out who they are, who they will be as an adult, what their interests are, who their friends are, and what defines them, what makes them them, what makes them unique as a person. And libraries can play a role in helping them develop these interests and skills through programming and through being a place where they can interact safely with their peers and trusted adults like us, right? So we already talked about that. The second area of development is biological. I think we are probably all familiar with puberty, I hope. So I won't go into a lot more detail here other than just to point out that it is, of course, a time of a lot of new hormones bouncing around. There's some uncertainty and insecurity that comes with that too. Also remember that a kid might look much older than they are or vice versa. They're all developing at very different rates. So you might have expectations of a certain level of maturity from a kid because they look older, but they are actually much younger than they appear, or it could be vice versa. Tweens, this is why I mentioned tweens, because they are definitely hit the hardest on this one. For girls, the onset of puberty and their growth spurt usually starts between 10 and 12, but it could actually start as young as 7. And then for boys, puberty starts usually on average between 11 and 13, and the growth spurt hits between 12 and 14. And of course, those are just averages. Everyone is different. The third area of development is cognitive or brain development. And this brain development has a huge impact on behavior. So we're going to be talking about that now. So, and I do want to point out this brain development, I am simplifying it very much, and I'm really only going to be mentioning 2 major areas of the brain. We have a lot of areas of the brain, but I think this kind of hits home what you need to know. So I mentioned that brain development has a huge impact on behavior, and this is why. The brain develops section by section, and it develops from the back up to the front. So one of the first areas of the brain that matures is the amygdala. And that is the area that rules your immediate reactions. So your fear, your aggression, your impulses. But one of the last parts to develop is the prefrontal cortex. And that's the area that helps them finally rein in some of those impulses and use a little more forethought and reasoning. And the thing with this one is it doesn't develop until quite late. And in fact, it's as late as 25 years old in some males. 25 years old before that area that controls impulses is fully developed. So, what do you think some of the implications of that would be? Any thoughts? And do you see what you think are the results of this in your library sometimes? Yes, quote unquote bad behavior, Julie. Anyone else? So, I mean, you can see that they might have the amygdala telling them to act on impulse without considering making out in the stacks. Yes, Samantha, because the amygdala is saying, "Oh yeah, let's do it. That seems like it would feel good to me right now." But they don't have the area that will help them fully consider those consequences developed yet. It's just not, the brain is just not fully developed yet. Another example would be, they might be like, oh, hey, that didn't work out for me last time. I played videos on my phone at full volume in the library. Maybe I shouldn't do that again. Like, that's just not necessarily going to occur to them all the time. And this is very generalized. Obviously, there are some teens that can control their behavior very well, but by and large, this is totally normal teen behavior. This lack of foresight, lack of learning from past mistakes, you might have to tell them many times before it really sticks with them. And by the way, has anybody out there have teenagers now or in the past at home? Yeah. Does it seem familiar? It sure seems familiar in my house. I have to repeat things multiple times to get my 13-year-old to stop doing certain things. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully now you understand why the teens are being loud and messy, and why they don't seem to ever remember that you told them to stop doing something. Yeah, so you say it repeatedly. Absolutely, Deborah. So we can check that one off, hopefully. So we know why they act like that. We understand why we should want them in the library despite the fact that they act like that. But what's the best way to get along with them harmoniously? That's our next question. So again, I want to ask your feedback first. Thinking about the brain development that we just talked about, what do you consider to be some best practices for working with teens? Jesse says food. What do you think that food does though? Like what are you doing by giving them food? We're going to dig deep. Yeah, Julie, engage them in conversation, laugh with them, build a relationship. And I think that's what I was getting at with the food thing too. You're giving them food maybe to bring them in, but then once you're giving them the food, you have a chance to get to know them. Anything else out there? A way to the heart is through the stomach. And then when they are not hungry, they are ready to participate, right? And I will also point out that you might have some kids who have food scarcity at home. Maybe the food at the library is like one of the, that and school maybe are the only places where they can get food. Let's see, Samantha says having a dedicated space where they can hang and be able to do things like listen to music, talk loudly, bad behavior items, quote unquote. We don't have a space to dedicate permanently, but I've selected 1 day per week to do so. That's fantastic, Samantha. Jan says school library, allow them a place to be away from others, a chat area. Yeah. Food allowed. So I love this. And this is one of the things I was going to mention earlier, but we'll talk about it now. I love the idea of setting aside either as one person has done here, Samantha, setting aside a day of the week, or even better, if you can if you're in a small library where sound really bounces around and you can't have just one area where teens can be loud, maybe you say every weekday from 3 until 6 or 3 till 7 is our loud hours. So if you're needing to come and study or you really need quiet, just be aware those are not the times to come, because we welcome and we want our teens and our school kids to feel welcome there during that time. Something like that is always potentially an option. Okay, so the next couple of slides, I have more teen tips. The first slide I'm going to share with you are general tips for interacting and developing those relationships. And then the second slide is tips for behavior management. And there might, we might have a little overlap with what you just shared, but I think that's great. It means you're on the right track. And this is not the be all end all either. I will add that. So if you have other ideas as I go, please throw them in the chat. Okay, so the first one is learn their names. Our goal here is to establish at least a friendly relationship with them. But if you know someone's name, especially a teen's, and they know that you know their name, then they're a little bit less likely to misbehave because you know who they are and they know you know who they are. But besides that, all humans, at least in the United States and our culture, we appreciate it when people know our names and remember our names. I know I love it when I go into my local coffee shop and they can say, "Hey, Beth, glad to see you here." I'm like, oh, they remember who I am. I'm memorable to someone. So that, that can really make them feel special too. I said empathy before, and I'll say it again. I'll say it repeatedly because I think it's so important just to have some empathy for them, to try to remember what it was like when you were a teen and seek to understand them. And also listen to them. So what are they into? Find out what they're excited about and let them talk to you about it, even if you don't know what they're talking about. Ask them to teach you about it or tell you about it. Teens love nothing more than to teach an adult something that the adult does not know. I mean, they already think that they know everything. So if they can teach an adult something, it's money. They love it. The next one is don't make assumptions about the teen you see in front of you. We talked about not assuming ages, but also don't assume that they're there to cause trouble. Also, don't stereotype yourself. Don't be that librarian or library worker, the grumpy, nasty, stereotypical old with the glasses and the cardigan. Glasses and cardigans are fine, but the kind of mean and grumpy shushing one is not so okay anymore. Jesse says that they have 2 boys who teach them new slang. That's awesome. And then also cut them some slack. So as we discussed, they are going to make mistakes. It is going to happen. It's inevitable. So just accept a little bit more noise and a little more mess during that time after school when they're most likely there. Set expectations with your other patrons. Like I said, if you need to set up a time during those hours where you just have signs or something that says, this is our non-quiet hours, then maybe you need to do something like that if you can. Let's see. Oh, and Deborah says, I had a group of boys and girls who taught me how to floss and do other dance moves. That's awesome. Our next one is be accepting and non-judgmental. It's not our place to judge the teens in our library, whether it's over their fashion choices, their sexual orientation or gender identity or anything. They are possibly dealing with plenty of other judgment from parents or peers. So our job is just to serve them to the best of our abilities and to accept them at face value, or how they wish to be accepted or seen. So again, let's be the safe place. You'll definitely earn their respect. And when you earn their respect, you also earn their good behavior most of the time. Treat them like adults. Again, teens believe that they are adults already. I can tell you that my now 18-year-old has thought he was an adult since he was about 13. So, treat them like it. Within reason anyway. Don't talk down to them. Don't act as if they're not going to understand. If they're causing a problem, explain why they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. Give them a reason so that they can understand it, and maybe they'll be more likely to actually stop that action. And the overall goal of all of these that I just mentioned is to establish an atmosphere at your library where the teens know you and you know them. So any sort of misbehavior can really be minimized if they know who you know that they are. So if you know that they know that you know who they are, did that make any sense? And if they respect you because they feel respected in return. So that being said, occasionally, obviously, you will encounter issues. So if a teen is causing a real problem, here are some strategies to try. And I will add, when I say a real problem, I mean that sometimes they're going to do stuff that is messy or loud, or maybe that you just would prefer that they not do, but you kind of have to step back and say, okay, is this really hurting anything, or is it just kind of annoying? And then you have to make a judgment call about whether you really want to stop them from doing that thing or if you can deal with it. So the first one is keep your cool. If you do have to approach them, don't let them see you ruffled. It might just spur them to keep going if they think that, they've got the power in that situation if they've upset you, right? It's kind of like dealing with a toddler. You're the adult, so you have to stay calm. And don't give in to the temper tantrums. Don't take it personally. The misbehavior that is occurring is almost certainly not about you. Remember that teens are very self-centered. That's, again, developmentally appropriate. They are very focused on themselves and their internal worlds. And so they are doing, and their social worlds too, but they are doing what they want, and probably the misbehavior is from a lack of self-control or just good judgment, right? But it is not done just to upset you. This one, give them a reason, explain why. I did mention this one before. It goes back to treating them like adults to a certain extent. They're capable of understanding, and they are capable of making good choices. So just explain what they're doing and why it needs to stop. Again, it's not personal. So an example of criticizing the behavior and not the person is if they're being loud, maybe you approach them and say, hey, I noticed it's getting a little loud over here. And there are people trying to study, because you're explaining why, right? So why don't you find another activity that's more quiet? And then you can make some suggestions of what they could do. We've got this, that, or this that you could do. So the implication is not that they are loud people who are always loud, but it is that they're getting a little loud. Their behavior is getting a little too loud for the situation. Also, here I should mention that if one person's the issue, try to address it away from their peers. If you try to if you do confront someone in front of their friends, it's probably going to embarrass them, and or it might escalate things because they'll want to show off in front of their friends, right? Be flexible, cut them some slack. So this goes back to, are they making a mess? Is it driving you crazy? Maybe. Pick your battles though. See if there are certain things that you can let go or just get a little more lenient about. You can do things like making a deal with whatever group comes in after school or something. Make a deal with them that maybe they cause a mess and you aren't going to say anything about it, but the deal is that they have to clean it up before they leave. And if they don't clean it up, they get a warning, or after it happens a certain number of times, they lose the privilege of getting to make a mess, or you stop letting them use the glue, or whatever. Of course, this stops short of things like spilling drinks and grinding food into carpets. But if it's something simple, just little pieces of something, then, it's annoying, but is it worth losing teens to go do ? In your community? The next one, be firm, fair, and consistent. If you like one kid but not another kid, that doesn't give you license to let the kid you like get away with something while yelling at the kid that you don't like. And believe me, all kids will notice this. They will think it is very unfair treatment, because it is, and it will probably just fuel more misbehavior. And just one more note Your library should have a behavior policy, hopefully. So make sure you become familiar with it and talk to your colleagues and supervisors so that everyone's on the same page about what to do if there's a true issue or emergency. If you do decide you need to ask a teen to leave for some reason, of course, obviously, if it is threatening behavior or something like that, it might be a slightly different story. But if you do decide you need to ask them to leave for whatever reason, try to let them know that you're sorry that you have to kick them out that day, that you have to ask them to leave, and that they will get another chance tomorrow. It's important to give them another chance because, as we talked about, they don't always learn the first time. And as long as, again, it's not hurting anyone or threatening anyone, then I think they deserve that chance to correct their behavior. All right, so that really covers my whole presentation portion of this. I do have a resource handout with some of those tips listed. Let me put that link in the chat. There you go. And I can also go ahead and put the LEU certificate in the chat, and that is here. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or if you just want to share things that have worked for you in your library with teens, I would be happy to hear that. We have a few minutes left. And if not, thank you for coming today.